Every astronaut has been in awe of how beautiful Earth is from space. And it's at ground level that the beauty comes into greater focus. Some spaces are particularly unique. Hamilton, Ontario, is home to a very special open space. This area is made up of several segments, including lands around Cootes Paradise that rise up towards a heritage jewel, the Niagara Escarpment. This is where plants, fish, turtles, birds, and mammals live wild, close to the heart of a city. This is the Dundas EcoPark, a stunning haven for nature as well as the physical and mental health of people who live in the Hamilton community. The lands here are a segment of the larger Cootes to Escarpment Park system, linking two neighbouring cities, Hamilton and Burlington. You're about to see how special this place is and why it needs protecting forever. The gateway to the Dundas EcoPark starts here on King Street East, on what used to be the famous Veldhouse greenhouse property. The park stretches all the way up to Pleasant View and heads east towards Highway 6. McMaster University is the cornerstone boundary to the south, and the Niagara Escarpment, a UN-designated biosphere, is the boundary to the north. 3,325 acres stretch out here in total, dominated by one of North America's most significant wetlands, right here in Cootes Paradise. The green lines show that 80% of the land in the Dundas EcoPark is already in the hands of 7 public agencies and groups: the Royal Botanical Gardens, City of Hamilton, Hamilton Conservation Authority, Conservation Halton, the Bruce Trail Conservancy, McMaster University, and the Hamilton Naturalists Club. The wider Cootes to Escarpment system is owned by these partners together with the Hamilton Harbour Remedial Action Plan, the City of Burlington and the region of Halton. But there's still parts of the Pleasant View area held in private hands. To survive, wildlife needs corridors of land to migrate, to find food, and connect with other groups in their species. So it's important to protect these corridors, and the best way to do that is to buy the remaining privately held lands. That's why the Hamilton Conservation Foundation launched a fundraising campaign. The Dundas EcoPark will take in ecological links through Coldwater and Spring Creeks into the well-known Dundas Valley, which was protected from development in the 70s and 80s through the vision of the Hamilton Conservation Authority. Between the Cootes to Escarpment Park system and the Dundas Valley conservation areas, we'll be creating an enviable collection of connected green space close to a part of southern Ontario that's becoming increasingly urbanized. Local experts agree the Dundas EcoPark is exactly what Hamilton needs now from a health, ecology, community development and business perspective.
What role does nature play in health? Without nature, we'd be dead. I mean, although the modern mind, we don't often think of nature and health, or we think of it when there's a disaster. Right? Oh, there's a flood. People were injured or sick or killed, you know. Oh, there's global warming. We could get diseases from bugs that are moving north because the climate's warming up. That's how we often think of nature and health, is when something bad happens. But if you look at it, if it weren't for these plants around us, we would not be able to breathe. If it weren't for these plants capturing the slightest fraction of energy that the sun puts out, this planet would be desolate and barren like most of the other planets in the solar system and bodies in the solar system that we know.
In the last decade, we've discovered a lot more about these lands. We undertook a study starting in 2006 and running for a couple of years after that to ask a basic question: how many plants are here? We've had scientists looking at the distribution of wild plants in this landscape since the mid-1950s in a serious way. And what taking all of their information and combining it led us to in 2006-2007 was kind of a startling realization. The 10 square kilometers of property that Royal Botanical Gardens owns is the richest place in all of Canada for plant species diversity. You cannot find another area the same size with as many wild plant species growing on it as we have right here. And it's a staggering thought and an amazing coincidence of foresight that the biodiversity hotspot for Canada is in a protected botanical garden.
Open spaces in cities, in the urban fabric, is critical, and it should be at an equal level with sewers and other infrastructure requirements. Too often, though, open spaces are being neglected, and I think it's really important that we protect whatever is still available. And this is just one example, the EcoPark. It's an example of a big chunk of open space. It has some very important ecological values. It is a link between the Niagara Escarpment and Lake Ontario through Hamilton Harbour and Cootes Paradise, which is very important from an ecological point of view. It's a very diverse area, and it covers about 3,300 acres, so it's a big chunk of land. But I come back to preventative healthcare. I think that's the easier for people to understand, and it makes a lot of sense. I think open space, if you have open space, and if people have access to open space, and make use of it, and we have connections to all the neighborhoods, either walking or cycling. When people begin to use open space, it has proven to be a way of reducing crime. From a healthcare perspective, you know, every day in the paper you read about exercise and the reduction of stress levels as being the key to a healthy lifestyle. Only open spaces, and maybe you can go to a gym, but open spaces and communicating with nature is the best way of doing it. So the more open space you have in a community, the better. And I think the cities that have the most open space, those have become the successful cities. So it isn't just health, but also the economy.
It's how do we build place, and how do we build place that is in connection with both people and the environment, because they are integrated. Our Earth today, we always thought it was this endless opportunity to just populate and do whatever we wanted to it. Then we realized that we're actually very much on a limited arc, and that whether we again admit it or not, we are interconnected by virtue of being in the same space. And although it seems large, it's actually relatively small. So what we'd like to talk about, what I'd like to speak about in terms of why companies and what companies get involved, is that to become more educated about what they do and how it actually impacts those around them, but ultimately, because of the connection, is going to impact them. It may not be initially measurable, whether we admit it or not, but we need to begin to understand it, is that we are part of the ecosystem, we are part of the social ecosystem, and that kind of what goes around comes around. And so you need to begin to understand that these are not just costs that we are doing in terms of what we do in our communities. These are investments in our communities, and strong investments in communities make strong people.
The Dundas EcoPark is also important from an environmental and ecological point of view.
Starting with the big picture, I think it's quite clear to most people now that humans have had a dramatic effect on the world, that we have had negative impacts on habitats everywhere. The availability of natural habitat is diminishing dramatically, and we have very few pockets of that habitat left in many parts of the world. We live in an area around Hamilton and Dundas area where there is a lot of green space. That green space is interrupted in large part, so there are fragments. But the EcoPark idea is an excellent one, because what it does is it maintains these connections. It allows corridors, it keeps patches of habitat close together. From a conservation biology perspective, it's a very important idea. It's one that we can't afford to do without, because Carolinian forest is very limited and is being diminished in large part because of increasing population, sizes and demands of humans. So projects like this, I think, are crucial. The EcoPark will have a variety of habitats. Obviously, we're standing here at Cootes Paradise Marsh, so there's marsh habitat, there are wetlands included, there are uplands included, so connecting from the marsh right up to the escarpment means there will be dry forests, there will be various types of wetlands, including, I presume, parts of swampland, marshland, certainly Carolinian forest, whole variety. Certainly air quality is one that we should always be concerned about, impacts of that air pollution on DNA, and in particular DNA mutations that were passed from generation to generation. And trees in particular are very effective filters, filtering out particulate air pollution, which in studies that we did and experiments that we did in the Hamilton Harbor area, we were able to show experimentally that the reason for increased rates of germline mutations, that is mutations in the DNA that are passed from one generation to the next, was particulate air pollution. Trees are essentially natural HEPA filters. The particulate sticks to the leaves on the trees. They're quite effective at drawing some of this particulate out of the air. And as many forests as we lose, we're losing HEPA filters. There are all kinds of other respiratory and cardiac problems that come from particulate air pollution, and the more trees we have, the better off we are in that sense. They act as filters.
It all centers around Cootes Paradise, and Cootes Paradise is a large natural wetland. It's the last remaining significant Great Lakes coastal marsh on the western end of Lake Ontario. And even today, after it's had a century of damage because of ecological problems like the introduction of carp to the Great Lakes, Cootes Paradise is still the place where half of the fish in the western end of Lake Ontario spawn. There's almost no place left for reproduction in the wild by these animals. So this area is extremely important for reproduction. It's a haven for birds and for fish. The stream that's behind us here, the Grindstone Creek, in a few weeks, this is early fall, people will start seeing salmon coming up this creek. These are Pacific salmon that have been stocked into Lake Ontario because the Atlantics are gone. We're one of the most important bird stopover points for migratory birds. There's about 260 bird species that are known from RBG's properties. And in fact, bird protection is at the heart of what RBG was created to do.
Considerable public spending and private philanthropy currently goes towards our healthcare systems. The EcoPark will also play an important role in keeping us physically and mentally healthy.
If it weren't for the ground and even the bacteria, I mean, we don't think about bacteria much, although it's coming up more and more in the news. If you think about your cells, less than 10% of them are human. Most of them are bacterial. Like, we are an ecosystem, and we don't really think about that as much, although it's starting to come into consciousness, right? We are part of this broader ecosystem. We're made of earth, and we're made of water, and we're made of sky, and we're made of plants, and we're made of animals. Like, we're made of it. So anything that happens to the earth happens to us. Any way that we treat the earth is a reflection of something going on inside of ourselves, right? So obviously clean water, healthy food, some places to walk, some contact with nature, these are pivotal parts to someone's health. You know, sometimes when life is really chaotic and jumbled, I think being somewhere like this is an amazing thing to do, right? Because if you look out here, it looks like chaos, right? Like the trees aren't in rows, these plants are growing one on top of the other, but at the same time, everything's in place. Like, everything is exactly where it's meant to be. You know, even if it's an invasive species, if it's an invasive species, it's meant to be here today, right now, because somehow someone brought it over and it found a little niche here. I'm not saying it should be here, but today it is here, right? So my hope is that somehow that diffuses into people's consciousness when they're out here and when they're troubled. It brings them outside of themselves. It brings them back to something that's far older than whatever problem that they have, far older than even their own human life. And hopefully it stirs something within them that is majestic or moving or even scary, that shifts them out of whatever stuck place they're in.
I think we have incredible potential as human beings, and I think that our minds work in, our minds work in very, very different sort of portions that do certain things. But I think that one part of our brain consciousness is definitely one that is the intuitive one, which if you don't develop that, you're missing out on a whole range of your potential, and I think your happiness and balance, and nature is the clue to that intuitive side, I believe, because your ego is kind of nullified when you're in nature. You're open. You go out and you are so interested and stimulated by the sights and by the sounds that you kind of drain out your ego self, and you let something else come in. You let the stimulus come in, and that's what gives you the inspiration side of your consciousness.
Hamilton is working hard to become the best place to raise a child, and the Dundas EcoPark will be a green space where children can be outside in nature, having fun, and learning at the same time.
The kids that we bring love it here. For them, a lot of them, it's their very first nature outing. So for them, this is Algonquin Park. They feel they're in deep, deep wilderness when they're here. And they just, at first, a lot of times they're nervous, but then they really get into it because we have activities that keep them busy, and like they see what new trees there are, and that they're all different types of trees and not all the same species, and different wildlife, and so they remember some of what we talked about in the classroom, and so they really get into it, and they get a good workout. When I was developing our school program, I kept the property in mind because this is such a great place to bring kids from school groups. It's a fabulous place. They can see the different habitats, they can hear the different birds. There's lots of different activities that we can do, so it's perfect, and it's not that far for them to travel.
I know that I feel calmer when I go outside. Not everybody does, but I think a lot of people do. And so if there's no outside to go to that is somehow wild in some way, or at least left somewhat cultivated but has outdoor open spaces, I think people go a little stir crazy. What you need in a city, I think, is enough green space. What's enough? I'll leave that to the urban planners to answer. But hopefully something where within 5 or 10 minutes walk, ideally, or 5 or 10 minutes drive, you can get somewhere that has a bit more green space, a bit more openness, a bit more trees, a bit more place where you can gather with your friends, or maybe meet new people, right? Where there's this kind of relaxedness and gets us out of this box-like environment that we built for ourselves and the box-like thinking that comes with it.
Because in the past decade or so, we've discovered that if you're inside and you're a child, you're probably being wired wrong. Kids need to be outside to play in nature. They need the experience of hands-on in the mud and the sticks and the twigs and seeing the birds and the plants. Just to be able to develop as a well-centered, capable human being. Their emotional and their intellectual development really depends on having a good touch of nature. To attract people for a great place to live, you've got to have what they want in their lives, not just close proximity to a highway that takes them to their work and back again, or a highway that takes them to their grocery store and back again, which is even worse. You've got to have spaces where people can get out and walk and experience nature in a regular way and make it part of their lifestyle.
The Dundas EcoPark area was a special place for the First Nations, and later for the European settlers.
The culture called Princess Point, which is a woodland culture, which are so far as we can tell, and we've got fairly good evidence, were the first farmers. cultivators. Well, as all cultures do, cultures change through time. These cultures were changing in various ways. It's not just the agriculture, the introduction of agriculture was a huge thing economically, but with growth of populations, changes in, well, sedentism, staying in one place, changes your whole attitude toward the environment. It becomes much more important that you control particular places instead of territories. And a whole lot of other things change, including styles. One of the ways that we track, in a general sort of way, is changes in pottery style. We've got a pretty good handle on what, they're using pottery as containers. That's what defines the woodland period. They started using pottery in Ontario in about 1000 BC. And then it changes and it develops, changes a lot in terms of the form. There's one of the few whole pots that we have that dates to Princess Point. They break these things, they throw them away. For some reason, they broke this pot, but then threw all the pieces into one place, and an archaeologist found it and was able to glue it back together again. I'd say there's only about 5 whole pots from this time period in existence. These are actually remarkable pieces of technology because they're made completely by hand. There's not wheel thrown. They're extremely symmetrical, and the walls are consistently relatively thin. Like, I can pick this pot up. If I'd have made this thing, the walls would be so thick that you couldn't move the thing again. Okay, what they're used for is a variety of stuff that you would use containers for: storage, foodstuffs, storage of water, but also cooking. For one thing, we've got that maize. That's a big deal. And it's the earliest maize in Ontario, by the way. Earliest maize in Canada. And Princess Point, that site after which the culture is named, is internationally known. Is covered in the literature. For example, the current textbook called North American Archaeology has a whole section on the Princess Point culture because it is associated with that change in economy, which the origins of agriculture worldwide are an extremely important question to archaeologists and to anthropology because it completely changed our lives. Good, bad, and different, it completely changed our lives. Living in one place 24/7 is very different from moving around. Hunter-gatherers actually have an extremely well-balanced diet generally. They're not living from hand to mouth. They certainly wouldn't have been in southern Ontario in prehistoric times. Rich. And they eat everything, and it's a highly varied. What happens with agriculture is that very often you end up focusing on 1 or 2 crops and 1 or 2 animals, like wheat, barley, sheep, and goats in the Middle East. And this is not conducive to long-term good health. Dental problems just go, dental problems, modern dental problems are basically a result of agriculture. These are highly intelligent, highly sophisticated, well-adapted people. We're no better adapted than they were, and we're no more sophisticated actually either. We just got lots more iPads and things.
Desjardins Canal was the biggest and earliest industrial foothold into Dundas, aside from the Spencer Creek, I guess, and all the mills. The canal was the brainwave of Mr. Peter Desjardins. Peter Desjardins, who had the vision, and he went in partnership with William Lyon Mackenzie for a while as well, if you know your Canadian history. And the canal started being dug out in 1827. The idea was to link the western part of Lake Ontario to Dundas, which then was in a burgeoning and thriving industrial community, and for easier transport for the ships to come down here, and for easier access to ship the goods further east. And unfortunately, Peter Desjardins passed away mysteriously in 1827, just after the canal was started. And the canal was realized, it was finally finished in August of 1837. Then the floodgates opened. There were boats coming in, businesses set up, the town's population exploded. Hotels were set up, Warehouses were set up all along up inside up and down the canal, and the town just thrived big time. And for about 20 years that was the case. All sorts of goods, flour, sugar, you name it, wheat came down here, and a lot of the mills, which were located on the Spencer Creek, took a lot of those goods and used them for their goods, and it was a great symbiotic relationship.
Okay, we're now on an original section of the York Road. Now the trick is as we go along here, to imagine that it is horses and wagons and perhaps cannons during the War of 1812 coming at us rather than cars. Now what's neat about the road is it is original. So you got, we saw it on the map, now you're seeing it as it is and as it was. Except that of course it would have been, probably would have been an open oak forest on either side. Now instead of these trees. And here we're at the top part of the York Road, and you get a vista out over that side. And of course you get a vista on the other side as well. And here, what we're passing here was probably the way station that's marked on the map, where you could refresh your horses, that clump of trees. Now you've got a really lovely view over there. There's just no doubt about it. Now coming up here, you have an S-curve. And that will be original. In 1812 to 14, or 1815 when the map was done, is that this curve would have actually existed. And it's S so that it goes down the incline one way and the incline up the other, and it would have had probably a log bridge at the bottom where we're crossing now. And the reason it's this particular shape is so that the horse is pulling a wagon, or as I say, if it was soldiers, horses pulling a cannon, would be able to get up the incline fairly easily. It's quite unique to have a road that is that old, that still follows the original, well, it still is the original road for that matter.
Artists, writers and visionaries also feel strongly about why the EcoPark is an opportunity we must see happen.
I think that experience of just being able to have that otherness of nature so close by is fundamental to my creativity as an artist, but I would say it's essential to have a kind of a balanced life. So the proximity of it, like even if you're just, seeing it or feeling it, I think it's really important to have it. But it's also very important to have an undisturbed area that you can go to. I think when you go into those kinds of areas, you experience a shift in consciousness that is quite profound. Just as a family, going for a walk, you will experience a different feeling. But if you pursue that feeling and ask questions about it and experience it more and more and more, you're going to find yourself going into something deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's a thing that will just give you endless stimulation and happiness. I think I always feel that the reason why I love nature so much is that I know that all my questions about being a person, being an individual, being part of this experience of life, all those questions are there. They're answered in the natural world. The importance of nature in our lives goes beyond just experiencing that other. It's developing a relationship with it that feeds back. So I see nature as a consciousness almost that links in with ours, and I see nature or being in nature as a reciprocal. It's a relationship. It's not just me and that. It's something where we're blending, and I get an experience of something huge.
These are geographical features which are unique to this part of the country, this part of the world, and we'll never see them again if we lose them. They're not going to come back. This is sacrosanct. I think that's what it says. We have a burgeoning arts community that's really doing some strong things with our infrastructure and with our resources, and even potentially with our job market. And we also have, and in some ways I think it might be related to the rise of the arts community, this great natural beauty which probably inspires people to think about beauty and about values and what we're really going to be doing with our civic life, what our civic identity is going to mean. When people come here now, and the bicycle race in 2003 I think really highlighted that. I hope we can have something like that again real soon. We could use it, which shows off our natural splendor. I think it's a change of identity. It really is a change of self-perception. And when I see this EcoPark initiative, I think that is so what we need to be doing.
I think that there's far less opposition philosophically to conservation and ecological projects than there was 40 years ago. So EcoPark, I think, comes at a time in history where people understand it, people get it, and will support it. I think the question is going to be, well, where do we get the money? And my answer to that is the money will come. It's the right thing to do. It's something that will increase the standard of living for everybody in Hamilton. Probably increases land value, in a maybe imperceptible way, but it's there. So I think it's probably one of the wisest investments that can be made.
Well, Hamilton's an interesting city because it's for so many years, so since the 19th century, it's been it's kind of bragged that it's been the industrial center of Canada. It's been the Birmingham of Canada, or the Pittsburgh of Canada. And of course, over the last 30 years, it's had to, as industry has left, it's had to kind of try to redefine itself. And one of the things that got lost during that whole big reign of industry was the fact of the city's natural location at the, this very western tip of Lake Ontario, where the Dundas Valley is, where the Niagara Escarpment makes this U-turn around the end of the lake. A spectacular setting that was noted, right away when people of our ilk, our European ilk, first came here. But the value it has in and of itself, and the value kind of increases, the more the city goes, it's almost immeasurable. It's like having Central Park in New York or something. This is a bit of area that's not exactly wild, but it certainly is wild enough. And it's well, let's not even say it's wild, because wild implies that human beings don't live there. Human beings do live around here. It's a park. It's part of the kind of natural park-like setting that we live in Hamilton. Hallelujah, because not many cities can claim that. And to save that would help perpetuate that sort of, even self-image for the city, which in my books would be a good thing. Something like the EcoPark, or even, now that the industry is diminished, it gives us an opportunity to sort of reclaim, in a way, that our natural setting, the geographic setting, the landscape here. And it's an opportunity for Hamilton to redefine itself, perhaps in different terms than it was defined before. And I think ultimately better terms, more sustainable terms, and certainly more beautiful terms.
Our civic leaders also see this as an important opportunity.
I find in my experience in this life that it's in green space that people come together, whether it's for a picnic, to share conversation, a cup of good coffee, walking the dog, running, biking, kids playing. I just think for me it's where I feel the most connected to where I come from.
So it really would represent one of the largest natural spaces in the urban part of southern Ontario. And as you know, the RBG has got all these incredible plants, probably the most diverse collection of plants in an ecosystem anywhere in Canada. And the escarpment is the east-west corridor throughout southern Ontario. So connecting those two makes really a rare functioning urban ecosystem.
It's very unusual that there should be such an extensive tract of natural terrain as rich in biodiversity as that area in such close proximity to some of the most densely populated urban areas in the country. So that makes it very interesting. From a scientific point of view, but it also makes it imperative from a human point of view that that land should be preserved. We have an obligation to turn our research, our discoveries, and our teaching towards the protection and preservation of the natural world.
Like it's this wonderful balance of a vibrant small town Ontario, which is actually a subset of a city, 45 minutes from Toronto, yet our backyard is nature. It's streams, waterfalls, hiking, and it really adds a whole dimension to everyone's lives here. It means that we have space to breathe and places to go and things to do that are good for us, that are healthy. So the Dundas part, or this whole connection of this ribbon from escarpment to lake, I think is a really valuable asset that as Dundas is maturing, we really have to capitalize on and not lose sight of. We can't let it just disappear. There's very few opportunities like this.
We have so much opportunity to do things that are so incredible in our communities and for the province, for the country, quite frankly. And it's not just this project. You think about what this project will do in projects like this, the spin-off, the ripple effect that will have on every single kid in our community in the schools to see that our community values what we as kids value when we talk about and we draw our pictures about green space. Yeah. And suddenly it's sort of like, wow, I can aspire to that. And we set a whole new bar for excellence, not just for the community, but for the kids in the community, right? So that's real leadership. And I find that exciting leadership.
There's always been a natural gateway that's come into Dundas along the Cootes Drive. And the fact that we can preserve that for perpetuity, showcase the heritage, the history that took place along that particular thing, but ensure that nature is preserved along there. The fact that we have such a natural accumulation of land in Cootes Paradise, and the 9 stakeholders around it in their own way want to preserve, not only preserve the lands, but preserve their uses around it.
It excites me to think about the possibilities of marrying some of the holdings of the Conservation Authority, the RBG, the City of Hamilton, and making that something that would be really remarkable on a national and international scale. And that's why the whole concept of the EcoPark excites and inspires me. It's a possibility, and all we have to do is dream big dreams and actually commit to knitting together the disparate parts that already exist. So we have a great natural network already. We need to connect a few more of the dots and bring a little bit more commitment and resource to play. And I think this thing is something that we as a community can do, that we will be proud of, and that would be a remarkable legacy for the next generation.
You know, you can't help but be concerned about the amount of green space which we're leaving available for our citizens and equally for all of the other species around. And we're attempting to create a naturalized area here that will rival in size any of the large parks in North America, and I think will, bespeaks the interest that Hamilton has in creating a better environment for its citizens.
Everybody's got to have a home. You and I and the birds and the animals, insects, they all have to have homes. So we need to protect homes for the nature that can't protect itself, right, from the human species.
So when I think about initiatives like the Dundas EcoPark, I think that really fits nicely into that whole notion of striking a better balance between the human world and the natural world, but also recognizing that as humans, we all really need those kinds of places nearby for us to get into and enjoy. So the EcoPark to me is a really fabulous example of that kind of an effort.
But you need a bit of a creative mind, and you have to be able to look beyond your own life years, I guess, and your own lifespan, and say, this is so important for the city and for my children and grandchildren. And if we don't act now, and if I just sit back and let it happen or not happen, then I'm sort of guilty of of not making the city what it can be.
So there you have it, $1 million view, but also a million people view. And it's a view that should be kept for another 200 years.
As humans, we sometimes get so wrapped up in our lives that we forget this planet isn't here just for us. We forget it's a home we share with nature and the systems on which our survival depends. Here's our once-in-a-lifetime chance to look at the bigger picture, to leave a different mark on our world, and to help build an eco-park right down here.